In the heart of the grand kingdom of Zuara, a palace of golden domes and ivory walls stood as a symbol of power, wealth, and legacy. The palace was home to Princess Zalika, the only daughter of King Jabari and Queen Nafisa. From the moment of her birth, the kingdom had rejoiced, believing she would grow into the most desirable bride in all the lands. And they were right, at least in part. Zalika was everything a royal daughter should be. She had skin as smooth as the river's surface, eyes deep like the midnight sky, and a grace that made the finest dancers envious. She was wise beyond her years, a quick thinker, and a lover of poetry and philosophy. Many whispered that she would make an even greater ruler than her father. But Zalika carried a burden that no royal status could erase, a terrible scent that clung to her body like a curse. It had started when she was 13. At first it was mild, something the royal attendants assumed was caused by the hot sun. But as she grew older, the scent deepened, became stronger, so powerful that it overpowered perfumes, baths, and oils. The palace had hired the best herbalists, imported the rarest flowers, and even consulted priests who prayed over her for days. Nothing worked. By the time Zalika reached marriageable age, the problem had become unbearable. At first, suitors from every kingdom came in droves, eager to marry a woman of such beauty and status. They presented gifts of gold, fine silk, and rare gemstones, hoping to win her hand. But the moment they stood close enough to her, their smiles faltered, and their eyes darted toward the door. Some left immediately. Others tried to endure for the sake of her wealth, but soon, even the most desperate of them found an excuse to leave. And then there was Prince Aid of Njoro. He had made it further than the others, enchanted by her intelligence and grace. The wedding had been arranged, and preparations filled the palace with excitement. But on the night before their vows, as he passed her in the corridor, a strong gust of her scent filled the air. His face turned pale. The next morning, his entire family had vanished from the palace without a word. Zalika had been humiliated before the entire kingdom. Her father had ordered the gates shut, declaring that no man was worthy of his daughter, but Zalika knew the truth. They were not unworthy, they simply could not bear to be near her. Heartbroken, she locked herself away in her chambers, staring at her reflection in the mirror. "Why?" she whispered, pressing a trembling hand to her chest. "Why must I suffer this fate?" Her mother sat beside her, stroking her hair. "We will find a way, my daughter. There is always a way." But Zalika was no longer sure. She had everything a woman could desire, yet she had never felt more alone. For weeks, the palace remained silent about Princess Zalika's predicament. The royal court avoided speaking of the failed engagement, and her parents dismissed every marriage proposal that arrived. The people of Zuara whispered amongst themselves, but no one dared to say the truth aloud. The princess was cursed. Zalika grew tired of her isolation. She still walked the palace gardens, still read poetry in the sunlit halls, but she no longer smiled. She avoided the royal feasts, knowing that the scent would make even the palace guards hesitate before standing too close. Her mother and father continued to seek answers, but the healers and scholars who came to the palace only repeated what the last had said. Nothing could be done. Until the day a stranger arrived at the palace gates. His name was Kato. Unlike the nobles who visited Zuara in gold-embroidered robes, Kato wore simple brown garments that had seen many travels. His hands were calloused, his feet bare, and his eyes sharp, the eyes of a man who had seen too much. He was no prince. He was not even from a noble family. Kato was a herbalist, a man who had spent his life studying the mysteries of plants, roots, and ancient remedies. He had once been respected, but an accident in his village had cost him everything. A mixture he had created, meant to heal, had instead caused illness. People had died, and he had been blamed. Banished, unwanted, and wandering from town to town, Cato had little left to lose. But when he heard of the princess with the scent that no perfume could hide, something inside him stirred. "This is no ordinary ailment," he had told the palace guards. "Let me see her, I may know what plagues her." The guards laughed, for many had come before him with the same claim, but Cato's eyes did not hold greed, nor did his voice carry the arrogance of a man seeking wealth. And so, out of amusement, or perhaps curiosity, they allowed him to enter the palace. King Jabari and Queen Nafisa sat on their grand thrones, their expressions weary from years of searching for answers. Zulika stood beside them, dressed in the finest blue silk, her posture straight, but her eyes dull. When Cato was brought before them, he did not bow deeply like the others. He lowered his head just enough to show respect, but his eyes remained fixed on Zulika. "You believe you can help my daughter?" the king asked, studying the strange man before him. Cato nodded. "I do not know if I can, your majesty, but I know that this is not an ordinary condition. It is not of the body alone, it is something deeper." The queen's brows furrowed. "What do you mean?" Cato took a slow breath before answering. "A scent this strong. It is not natural. It is not caused by illness or poor hygiene. No, this is something ancient, something unnatural. If I may be so bold, your highness, this is a curse." The court gasped. Even the king, who had dismissed such rumors, hesitated. But Zulika did not react. She simply stared at the man before her, her expression unreadable. "If that is true," she said at last, her voice steady, "then tell me, stranger, how do I break it?" Cato smiled, though there was no amusement in his expression. "That is what we must discover together." For the first time in years, something shifted inside Zulika: hope. Her father, still cautious, gave Cato 1 week. If he could find a cure, he would be rewarded beyond his wildest dreams. If he failed, he would be cast out, never to return. The challenge had begun. From the moment he was allowed to remain in the palace, he followed Princess Zulika through her daily routines, observing everything about her. He watched the way she moved, listened to the way she spoke, and studied every detail of her surroundings. He took note of the herbs used in her baths, the perfumes burned in her chambers, and even the food she ate. He spoke to the royal attendants, asking them when they had first noticed the change in her scent. But no matter how much he learned, one truth remained: the odor did not come from any external source. It was a part of her. "Tell me, princess," Cato said one evening as they stood in the palace garden, the scent of hibiscus flowers thick in the air. "Do you remember when this first began?" Zulika hesitated. No one had ever asked her this so directly. She turned her gaze toward the distant hills, lost in memory. "I was 13, she murmured. "At first it was faint. My mother believed it was just my body changing, that it would pass." "But it didn't," Cato guessed. She shook her head. "It only grew stronger." He studied her carefully. "And did anything happen around that time? Anything unusual?" Zulika frowned, trying to remember, but the years had blurred together, and she could not find a single moment that stood out. Cato sighed. He had been hoping for an answer, but it seemed the truth would not come so easily. That night, he decided to seek wisdom elsewhere. He called for Mama Asha, the palace's oldest griot, a storyteller who carried the history of Zuwara in her heart. She was a frail woman, her hair white as clouds, her skin lined with age, but her mind was sharper than any sword. When Cato told her what he sought, Mama Asha's expression darkened. "There is a story," she said, her voice barely above a whisper, "one that has not been spoken in years." Cato and Zulika leaned in closer. "A long time ago, before your father was king, there was a woman named Bala," Mama Asha began. "She was a healer, known for her wisdom and skill. People traveled from far and wide to seek her remedies. But one day, she fell in love with a prince from Zuwara." Zulika's breath caught in her throat. "A prince?" she echoed. Mama Asha nodded. He swore to love her, to make her his wife. But in the end, he betrayed her. He married another, one of noble birth, as his family had always planned. Bala was cast aside, humiliated before the entire kingdom. A heavy silence filled the room. What happened to her? Cato asked. Mama Asha's eyes gleamed. They say she cursed the bloodline of the man who broke her heart. She vowed that one day a daughter would be born into his lineage, a princess whose scent would drive all who came near her away. A woman destined to be loved by no one. The words struck Zalika like a blade. But that would mean, she swallowed hard, her heart pounding, that I am that daughter. Mama Asha gave a slow, solemn nod. You carry Bala's curse. A deep, suffocating silence followed. For the first time, Zalika understood. It had never been an illness. It had never been something wrong with her body. This was a punishment for a betrayal that happened long before she was even born. The weight of the revelation settled heavily on Zalika's shoulders. Her entire life, she had believed she was simply unlucky, that the gods had played a cruel joke on her. But now, knowing she was the victim of another's sins, she felt a new kind of rage bubbling inside her. Why should I suffer for something I did not do? She demanded, pacing the royal garden as Cato watched her quietly. The gods do not see time the way we do, Cato said. To them, pain is inherited. Justice is not about individuals, it is about bloodlines. Zalika clenched her fists. Then how do I end it? Cato exhaled slowly. The curse was born from love betrayed. To break it, you must prove that love can exist beyond your scent. She frowned. What does that mean? It means that someone must love you. Not your beauty, not your status, but you, despite the scent. Zalika laughed bitterly. That is impossible. You've seen how men react. No one can bear to be near me. Cato was silent for a long time before he finally spoke. Then I will. Her laughter stopped. She turned to him, her eyes narrowing. What? I will stay by your side, Cato said, his gaze steady. I will prove that love is stronger than a curse. If I can love you as you are, then the spell will have no power over you. Zalika's heart pounded in her chest. You say that now, but like all the others, you will run. Cato stepped closer. The scent hit him like a wave, thick and overpowering, but he did not flinch. I will not run, he said. And for the first time, Zalika believed him. Days turned to weeks. Cato remained by Zalika's side, and true to his word, he never once recoiled from her scent. At first, the princess was skeptical. She tested him, standing closer than necessary, speaking softly to see if he would step away. But Cato never wavered. They spoke for hours in the gardens, discussing everything from ancient poetry to the stars above them. They walked through the marketplace disguised as commoners, laughing at the absurdity of it all. For the first time in years, Zalika felt seen, not as a cursed princess, not as a burden, but as herself. Then one evening, something strange happened. Cato reached for her hand. The moment his fingers touched hers, the scent faded. Zalika's breath caught. Do you feel that? She whispered. Cato inhaled deeply, and for the first time, he smelled nothing. No overpowering odor, no curse, just the clean scent of the evening air. It's gone, he murmured. Tears welled in Zalika's eyes. She had spent her entire life believing she would never be loved, never be touched, never be wanted. But here, standing before her, was a man who had done the impossible. Cato had loved her before she was cured. And because of that, the curse had lifted. When she told her parents, they were hesitant. Marrying an outcast herbalist was unheard of. But when they saw the happiness in their daughter's eyes, they relented. And so, in a twist that no one could have predicted, Princess Zalika, once feared and shunned, married not a prince, but a humble man who had seen beyond her scent. Their love became a legend in the kingdom of Zuwara,